Step through the wrong gate and you could be executed. Bow at the wrong angle and you would be punished. Wear fabric above your rank and your life was forfeit. These were not battlefield rules. These were the daily realities inside a Japanese samurai castle. By the time the great white-walled fortresses with their soaring keeps reached their peak, the age of samurai warfare was effectively over. The last great battle had been fought. The country was united, and the castle had transformed from a military stronghold into something far more dangerous. A seat of government, a bureaucratic headquarters, and a gilded cage where hundreds of people lived under a social order so rigid that every movement was monitored and every gesture had consequences. A samurai castle was not a fortress. It was a machine for producing obedience. So what was it really like to live inside one? The answer begins not with warriors, but with walls. Let us set ourselves in a specific place and time. It is roughly the year 1640, and we are in Japan, in a castle belonging to a daimyo, a feudal lord, whose domain encompasses several hundred villages and a castle town of perhaps 20,000 people. The Tokugawa shogunate has been in power for nearly 4 decades, since Tokugawa Ieyasu's decisive victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. The country is at peace, a peace that will last astonishingly for over 250 years. The shogun rules from Edo, the massive new capital that will eventually become Tokyo, and he controls the daimyo through a system of extraordinary ingenuity and ruthlessness. Every daimyo in Japan is required to maintain a residence in Edo and to spend every other year living there, leaving his family behind as permanent hostages when he returns to his own domain. This system, called Sankinkotai, serves 2 purposes simultaneously. It keeps the daimyo under constant surveillance, making rebellion almost impossible to plan, and it forces them to spend enormous sums of money on the road, on maintaining 2 full households, and on the elaborate processions that accompany their travel between their domain and the capital. Money that might otherwise be spent on armies or fortifications. The social order of Tokugawa, Japan, is a rigid hierarchy of 4 classes, established by law and enforced with lethal seriousness. At the top stand the samurai, the warrior administrators who make up roughly 6 to 7% of the population and who hold a monopoly on the right to carry 2 swords. Below them are the farmers, who are respected in theory because they produce the rice that sustains the entire economy, but who are exploited in practice through heavy taxation. Below the farmers are the artisans, craftsmen, builders, metalworkers, and at the bottom are the merchants, who are officially despised because they produce nothing but grow wealthy by trading what others make. Below even this hierarchy are the outcast communities, the ETA and Hinin, who perform work considered ritually polluting, such as butchering animals, tanning hides, and handling the dead. This system, borrowed in broad outline from Confucian philosophy, is not merely a social preference, it is law. A farmer cannot become a samurai, a merchant cannot dress like one. The boundaries are absolute, and the punishments for crossing them are severe. Within this framework, the castle is the physical embodiment of the samurai class's dominance, the place from which the daimyo governs his domain, collects his taxes, administers justice, and displays the wealth and authority that justify his position. Now approach this castle from the castle town that surrounds it. The town, called a jakamachi, is not a random settlement that grew up organically around the fortress. It was planned. The streets are laid out in a deliberate pattern designed to confuse an attacking army. Right-angle turns, dead ends, narrow passages that force any invader into killing zones covered by archers on the walls above. But these same streets also organize the population by rank. The samurai retainers of the daimyo live closest to the castle in houses whose size and position reflect their status within the lord's hierarchy. Further out live the merchants and artisans, their neighborhoods organized by trade, a street of dyers, a street of metalworkers, a street of sake brewers. Temples and shrines occupy strategic positions at key intersections. The layout is not accidental. It is a map of the social order written in streets and buildings. You pass through the outer gate and enter the castle grounds. The first thing that strikes you is the stone. Japanese castle walls, called ishigaki, are constructed from massive stones fitted together without mortar, their surfaces carved and positioned with such precision that a blade of grass cannot be forced between them. The walls curve upward and outward in a distinctive concave slope that serves both an engineering purpose. The curve distributes the weight and resists earthquake damage, which in Japan is not a theoretical concern, and a psychological one. The walls seem to lean over you as you approach, impossibly tall, impossibly solid, suggesting a power that is both architectural and political. The stones at the base are enormous, some weighing several tons, and they were dragged to the site and set in place by teams of laborers working under the direction of master stonemasons, craftsmen whose skills were so valued that rival daimyo tried to recruit or kidnap them. Above the stone walls rise the plastered white walls of the castle buildings, punctuated by narrow windows and defensive openings. The main keep, the Tenshu, rises in the distance, a tower of 5 or 6 stories that appears to float above the walls, its successive roofs curving upward to the corners in a way that gives the entire structure an improbable lightness, as if this vast edifice of stone, timber, and plaster might at any moment lift from its foundations and drift into the sky. The Tenshu of a great castle like Himeji or Matsumoto is one of the most distinctive architectural forms in the world, instantly recognizable, unlike anything built in Europe, China, or anywhere else. But the Tenshu is not where the Lord lives. In most castles of this period, the keep is primarily a watchtower, a storehouse for weapons, and a symbol of the Lord's status. Daily life happens in the lower buildings, the palace complex that spreads across the inner baileys. The defensive architecture of the castle is not immediately obvious to the untrained eye, because so much of it is hidden within the beauty. The white plastered walls are not merely decorative, they are fire-resistant, built from a lattice of bamboo strips covered with layers of clay and lime plaster, and they are pierced at regular intervals with small openings of specific shapes. Circular openings are for muskets, square openings are for archers, triangular openings are for dropping stones onto attackers below. These openings, called sama, look almost ornamental from a distance, but each one is positioned to provide a clear line of fire along the walls and into the approaches. The corridors inside the outer walls are deliberately narrow and turn at sharp angles, forcing any attacker who breaches the gate to slow down and present themselves as targets. The floors of certain corridors are built with a deliberate creak called oguisubari, or nightingale floors, a construction technique in which metal clamps beneath the floorboards produce a chirping sound when stepped on, making it impossible for an intruder to move through the castle silently. These nightingale floors are one of the most ingenious security systems ever devised. Beautiful, invisible, and effective. You cross a bridge over the inner moat, a broad, still expanse of water that reflects the white walls above with such clarity that the castle seems to exist twice, once in stone and once in water. The moat is not merely decorative. It is stocked with carp, which serve as an emergency food supply during siege, and its banks are deliberately left steep and slippery to prevent easy crossing. Guards at the gate examine your credentials, a wooden pass bearing the seal of the official who summoned you. Without this pass, you do not enter. The security is not theatrical. It is absolute. Inside the gate, you step onto a pathway of carefully raked gravel that crunches softly under your sandals. The gardens that flank the path are immaculate. Prune pines, shaped azaleas, moss-covered stones placed with the deliberate artlessness that Japanese garden design elevates to a philosophical practice. The smell is clean and green. Pine resin, damp earth, the faintly sweet scent of moss. A dramatic contrast to the packed earth streets and cooking smoke of the castle town you have just left. The sound changes too. The noise of the town, the hawkers, the hammering, the children, fades behind the walls, replaced by the crunch of gravel, the splash of water over stones in an ornamental stream, and the occasional sharp clap of a servant's wooden sandals on a polished walkway. Everything here is designed to impress, to calm, and to remind you that you have entered a space where different rules apply. The main residential palace, the Goten, is a sprawling complex of single-story wooden buildings connected by covered corridors and arranged around a series of courtyards and gardens. You remove your sandals at the entrance, shoes are never worn inside a Japanese building, and step up onto a wooden veranda that has been polished to a soft sheen by decades of sock-clad feet. The floors inside are covered with tatami mats, thick, rectangular mats woven from rush grass over a core of compressed rice straw, each one precisely the same size, roughly 6 feet by 3 feet, and fitting together edge to edge to cover the entire floor. The tatami is firm but yielding under your feet. It smells faintly of dry grass, a clean, slightly sweet scent that is one of the defining sensory experiences of a Japanese interior. The rooms are defined not by permanent walls, but by sliding screens, fusuma, which are opaque panels painted with landscapes, birds, or abstract patterns, and shoji, which are translucent paper screens that admit a soft, diffused light even when closed. This means that any room can be made larger or smaller simply by opening or closing the screens, and the entire palace can be reconfigured in a matter of hours for different occasions. A reception, a banquet, a private audience. The decoration of these rooms communicates rank with the precision of a language. The Lord's audience chamber, the ohiroma, is the most lavish. The fusuma panels are painted with scenes of hawks, tigers, or pine trees by the finest artists of the Kano school, using gold leaf backgrounds that glow in the dim interior light and make the room feel as if it is illuminated from within. The ceiling is coffered and painted. An alcove called a tokonoma contains a hanging scroll of calligraphy or painting and a single flower arrangement, carefully chosen to reflect the season, the occasion, and the taste of the Lord. The floor of the tokonoma is raised slightly above the rest of the room, and the Lord sits with his back to it, facing the room, so that anyone who enters must look past the artwork and the flowers to see him. A spatial arrangement that frames the Lord as the centerpiece of an aesthetic composition. The rooms occupied by lower-ranking officials are progressively simpler. Plainer fusuma, less gold, fewer painted surfaces, so that your status within the castle hierarchy is visible the moment you step through the door of any room you are assigned to. The light inside these rooms is unlike anything in European architecture of the same period. The shoji screens filter sunlight into a soft, even glow that eliminates harsh shadows and gives every surface a gentle luminosity. On a bright day, the rooms seem to glow from within. On a cloudy day, they take on a silver-grey quality that the Japanese call wabi, a term that suggests rustic simplicity and the beauty of imperfection. The furniture is minimal by Western standards. There are no chairs, no tables in the European sense, no beds that remain permanently in place. You sit on the tatami, kneeling in the formal Caesar position, weight on your heels, back straight, hands on your thighs, which is excruciatingly uncomfortable for the uninitiated, but which, with years of practice, becomes as natural as sitting in a chair. Low writing desks, armrests, and small lacquered trays are brought out as needed and stored in closets when not in use. The aesthetic principle is emptiness. The Japanese concept of meaningful empty space, and the rooms achieve a sense of spaciousness and calm that belies their modest dimensions. You wake before dawn. The castle does not use bells to mark time, as European monasteries and castles do, but the rhythms of the day are no less fixed. A senior retainer makes his rounds, ensuring that each member of the household is awake and preparing for the day. You rise from your futon, a thin cotton mattress that you spread on the tatami each night and fold away each morning, because a room that serves as a bedroom at night may need to serve as an office or reception space by day. The air is cold. Japanese castles, for all their elegance, are not warm. The walls are thin. The paper screens do almost nothing to retain heat. In winter, the only warmth comes from a charcoal brazier called a hibachi, a ceramic or metal container filled with burning charcoal, over which you hold your hands and around which the household gathers, warming their fronts while their backs remain cold. There is no chimney, no fireplace, no central heating of any kind. The smoke from the charcoal is minimal, but the heat it produces is modest, and on the coldest mornings of winter, you can see your breath inside the rooms. You wash your face and hands with cold water from a wooden basin, rinse your mouth, and dress. If you are a samurai of any rank, your clothing is regulated by your status. You wear a kimono, a long wrapped robe of silk or cotton secured with an obi, a wide sash, over which you may wear a short jacket called a haori, and, for formal occasions, wide-legged trousers called hakama that give the distinctive silhouetted look of the samurai. The colors, fabrics, and patterns of your clothing are determined by sumptuary laws that specify what each rank may wear. A low-ranking samurai wears cotton or plain silk in muted colors. A senior retainer wears fine silk with the lord's family crest embroidered at specific points. Only the daimyo himself wears certain colors and patterns. Breaking these rules is not a matter of fashion faux pas. It is an offense against the social order. The dressing ritual alone can take considerable time if you hold any formal rank. The kimono is not simply pulled on, it is wrapped, adjusted, and secured in layers, each layer folded precisely, the seams aligned, the obi tied in a specific knot that varies depending on your status, your age, and the occasion. Your hair, if you are a male samurai, is oiled, gathered into a top knot called a shonmage, and shaved at the front of the scalp, a distinctive hairstyle that identifies your class as unmistakably as any uniform. The shaving is done regularly, sometimes daily, using a razor, and the top knot is secured with a paper or silk cord. Female members of the household have even more elaborate hairstyles, complex arrangements supported by combs, pins, and wax that can take an hour to construct and must be maintained by sleeping on a wooden pillow that supports the neck while keeping the hair undisturbed. The morning grooming ritual is not vanity, it is discipline. A samurai whose appearance is disheveled is a samurai who has lost control. And control over the body, over the emotions, over every visible aspect of the self is the foundation of everything. The morning meal is simple and arrives early. Rice, white, steamed, slightly sticky, is the center of every meal and the foundation of the entire economy. A samurai's stipend is measured in koku, one koku being the amount of rice needed to feed one person for 1 year, roughly 150 kilograms. Your salary, your rank, your housing, and your political importance are all expressed in terms of rice. Alongside the rice comes miso soup, a broth made from fermented soybean paste, dashi stock made from dried bonito flakes and kelp, and whatever vegetables or tofu are in season. There are pickled vegetables, tsukemono, small dishes of cucumber, daikon radish, or eggplant preserved in salt, rice bran or vinegar, sharp and salty, designed to complement the bland sweetness of the rice. There may be grilled fish, a small piece of salmon, mackerel or sardine, on formal mornings or when the lord is entertaining. This is the standard meal pattern of the samurai class, and it repeats with minor variations at midday and in the evening. The diet is healthy by the standards of the time, low in fat, high in vegetables and fermented foods, but it is also monotonous in a way that is difficult for a modern person to appreciate. You eat this meal with slight variations every day of your life. The preparation of food in the castle kitchen is both simple and exacting. Rice must be washed, soaked, and steamed with precision. Overcooked or undercooked rice is a serious failure. Fish must be cut correctly. The knife skills of a Japanese cook are legendary and are, even in this period, the subject of formal training and certification. Soy sauce, made from fermented soybeans and wheat, is used as a seasoning and a dipping sauce. Sake, rice wine, is served at formal banquets and on ceremonial occasions, but is not consumed daily by most retainers. Tea is the everyday drink. Green tea, brewed from powdered or loose leaves, served hot and without sugar or milk. Its bitter, vegetal flavor, an acquired taste that becomes, over years, an indispensable part of the daily rhythm. Meat is almost entirely absent from the samurai diet. Buddhism, which permeates Japanese culture, prohibits the killing of animals, and while this prohibition is not absolute, hunting is permitted, and wild boar and deer are occasionally consumed. The everyday diet of the castle household is essentially vegetarian, supplemented by fish and seafood. This is one of the most striking differences between the Japanese and European experience of the same period. While a European lord would expect roasted meat at every major meal, a Japanese daimyo dines on rice, fish, vegetables, tofu, and soup. The flavoring is subtle rather than bold. Soy sauce, mirin, sweet rice wine, dashi, ginger, wasabi, and the emphasis is on freshness and seasonality rather than preserved and spiced ingredients. Presentation matters as much as taste. Each dish is served in a specific vessel, ceramic, lacquer, or wood, chosen to complement the food and the season. A summer meal might be served on cool-colored ceramics that suggest water and shade. An autumn meal might appear on warm-toned lacquer that echoes the changing leaves. This attention, it is the standard expectation of the class, and a kitchen that serves a poorly presented meal, even if the food itself is delicious, has failed. The formal tea ceremony, shanoyu, is something more than a way to drink tea. It is a philosophical practice, a form of aesthetic training, and a social ritual that every samurai of education is expected to understand and participate in. Clothing in the castle is more than fabric. It is communication. The samurai's everyday wear, the kimono and hakama, is a language of status visible at a glance to anyone educated in its grammar. The quality of the silk, the subtlety of the dye, the presence or absence of family crests, called mon, specific positions on the garment, the width and material of the obi, all of these speak to the wearer's rank, their relationship to the Lord, and the formality of the occasion. A samurai attending a formal audience wears his most elaborate clothing, a kamishimo, a matching set of stiffened shoulder pieces and hakama trousers worn over the kimono, bearing the Lord's crest, creating a silhouette that is both imposing and rigid, like the social order it represents. The lower-ranking servants wear simpler cotton garments in muted colors. The women of the household wear layered kimono, multiple robes worn one atop another, the edges carefully arranged so that the colors of each layer are visible at the collar and sleeves, creating a deliberate gradient of color that is itself a form of artistic expression, governed by seasonal conventions. In winter, the layers provide warmth. In summer, lighter fabrics of hemp or thin silk are used, though even in the oppressive heat and humidity of a Japanese summer, which can bring temperatures above 35 degrees with near total humidity, the standards of dress are maintained. You suffer in silence. You do not loosen your collar. You do not roll up your sleeves. The code demands composure in all conditions, and the body is expected to obey. Hygiene in a samurai castle was, by the standards of the contemporary world, remarkably advanced. While Europeans in the same period were avoiding baths on the advice of physicians who believed open pores invited disease, the Japanese were bathing regularly, often daily, in the ofuro, a deep wooden tub of very hot water. The bath was not a place to wash. You washed before entering, scrubbing your body with a cloth and rinsing with buckets of water, but rather a place to soak, to warm the body, and to relax. The water in the ofuro was heated by a wood fire beneath or beside the tub, and it was shared by multiple users in order of rank. The Lord bathed first in the cleanest and hottest water, followed by his senior retainers, and so on down the hierarchy. By the time the lowest-ranking members of the household took their turn, the water was tepid and grey, but even this was cleaner than most Europeans would experience in a year. Toilets were simple but functional. A wooden platform over a pit that was regularly emptied, the waste collected and sold to farmers as fertilizer in a recycling system that was both practical and, by the standards of the time, remarkably sophisticated. The castle was not sterile. Insects, dampness, and the smell of the moat on hot summer days were constant companions, but it was, compared to a contemporary European castle or city, astonishingly clean. The afternoon brings martial training. Even in peacetime, the samurai must maintain his skills. In the castle's practice yard, retainers drill with wooden swords, bokken, practicing the precise, explosive techniques of kenjutsu, the art of the sword. The crack of wood on wood echoes off the stone walls. An archery range, the yeiba, stands along one wall where samurai practice kyudo, the way of the bow, a discipline that in peacetime has become as much a meditative practice as a martial one. There is also the practice of horsemanship, spear technique, and, increasingly in this era, the study of firearms. The arquebus, introduced to Japan by Portuguese traders a century earlier, has transformed Japanese warfare and is now a standard weapon in every castle's armory. But these martial skills are practiced with a strange, melancholy awareness that they may never be used. The peace holds. The wars are over. And the samurai, who define themselves by their willingness to fight and die, must now find a way to live. The samurai who inhabit this castle are not merely warriors. In peacetime, and Japan in 1640 has been at peace for 4 decades, they are bureaucrats, administrators, paper pushers. The sword that hangs at their hip is a symbol of their class, not a tool they use. Their daily work consists of managing the daimyo's domain, collecting rice taxes from the villages, maintaining roads and bridges, resolving disputes between farmers, recording births and deaths, inspecting granaries, and producing the endless flow of documents and reports that the shogunate demands from every domain. The senior retainers advise the lord on policy, manage his finances, and oversee the vast household that the castle contains. Lower-ranking samurai serve as guards, clerks, messengers, and administrators of specific departments: the treasury, the armory, the stables, the kitchens. The work is not glamorous. It is often tedious, but it is essential because the shogunate judges a daimyo not by his military prowess, which is no longer relevant, but by the orderliness, prosperity, and obedience of his domain. A poorly managed domain is a threat to the peace, and the shogun has the power to confiscate it. As evening falls, the castle takes on a different character. The oil lamps are lit. Small ceramic dishes holding rapeseed oil with a wick of twisted cotton, casting a warm, flickering light that makes the gold leaf fusuma panels glow and the shadows in the corridors deepen. The castle at night is a place of controlled stillness. Guards patrol the walls and gates. Night watchmen make their rounds, carrying lanterns and striking wooden clappers. Yoshigi, at regular intervals, a sound that carries across the sleeping compound and serves both as a fire warning system and a reassurance that someone is awake and watching. The lord may retire to his private quarters in the OQ, or he may receive a senior advisor for a quiet conversation over sake, a private audience that, away from the formal structures of the audience chamber, allows for a more candid exchange of views. These nighttime conversations, undocumented and unofficial, are where much of the real governance happens. The decisions that will be announced formally the next morning, presented as if they emerged fully formed from the Lord's wisdom, rather than from the late-night deliberation they actually required. The social dynamics within the castle walls are governed by a code of behavior so precise and so comprehensive that it regulates virtually every human interaction. The distance at which you kneel from a superior, the depth of your bow, the language you use. The Japanese language contains multiple levels of politeness, each calibrated to the relative status of the speaker and the listener. The position in which you sit, the order in which you enter or leave a room, the gifts you give and receive, the way you hold your tea bowl. All of these are determined by rank and by custom, and violating them is a serious matter. A samurai who fails to show proper respect to a superior is not merely rude. He is threatening the order itself, and the consequences can range from public humiliation to forced transfer to a remote posting to, in extreme cases, the order to commit seppuku, ritual suicide by self-disembowelment. The German physician Engelbert Kempfer, who visited Japan in the 1690s, noted with astonishment the elaborateness of Japanese social etiquette, writing that the civility, the complacence, the courtesy of the Japanese excels that of all other nations. They have so many ceremonies and compliments that a stranger finds himself quite confounded. What Kempfer recognized was not mere politeness. It was a system of social control that operated through etiquette rather than through visible force. A system so effective that Japan maintained internal peace for over 2 centuries without a standing police force or a centralized army. Entertainment in the castle takes forms that reflect the samurai's dual identity as warrior and aesthete. No theatre, a highly stylized form of masked drama performed on a bare wooden stage, is the prestige art form of the samurai class. The plays are slow, hypnotic, built on subtle gesture and the resonance of chanted poetry, and their themes, ghosts, warriors, betrayal, the impermanence of glory, speak directly to the samurai experience. Attending a no performance is not casual entertainment. It is a cultural obligation, a display of refinement, and an exercise in the focused attention that is valued in every aspect of samurai life. Board games, Go and Shogi, are played with intense seriousness. Go, in particular, is considered not merely a game, but a model for strategic thinking, and skill at Go is valued almost as highly as skill with a sword. Poetry composition, particularly haiku and its precursor forms, is a skill expected of every educated samurai, and impromptu poetry exchanges at gatherings are common, the quality of your verse serving as a public measure of your cultivation. Within the castle, women occupy a separate world. The lord's wife and his official concubines live in the Okyu, the inner quarters, a section of the palace that male retainers are forbidden to enter. The Okyu is managed by a hierarchy of women, from the lady of the house, who holds considerable informal power, to the lowest-ranking maids who clean the rooms and carry meals. Women of the samurai class receive a formal education that includes reading, writing, poetry, music, tea ceremony, and flower arrangement, but their sphere of action is strictly domestic. They manage the household, raise the children, and provide the lord with heirs. Marriage is arranged, a political alliance, not a romantic choice, and a wife who fails to produce a male heir may be divorced and sent back to her family. The emotional life of the castle's women is almost entirely absent from the official records. What we know comes from diaries, letters, and the rare literary work, the most famous being the great Heian-era works of Murasaki Shikibu and Sei Shonagon, written centuries before our period, but still read and studied by educated women of the Edo era as models of feminine accomplishment and emotional expression. The Sankin Kotai system, the alternate attendance obligation, places a particular strain on the castle household. Every other year, the daimyo must travel to Edo with a retinue that may number several hundred people. Samurai retainers, servants, porters, cooks, doctors, attendants, in a formal procession that follows prescribed routes, stops at designated inns, and maintains the elaborate pageantry expected of a lord of his rank. The cost is staggering. Some daimyo spend as much as half their annual income on the journey alone, and the expense of maintaining a second household in Edo, with its own buildings, servants, and social obligations, consumes much of the remainder. The processions themselves are spectacles, long columns of men marching in formation, porters carrying lacquered boxes of possessions, mounted samurai in formal attire, the lord's palanquin at the center, and commoners along the route are required to kneel and avert their eyes as the procession passes. For the samurai who make this journey twice, they live a divided life, half the year in the castle they call home, half the year in the shogun's capital, never fully settled in either place, their families permanently held in Edo as silent hostages for their loyalty. Celebrations within the castle follow the calendar of seasons, festivals, and the ceremonial obligations of the samurai class. New Year is the most important celebration, a multi-day festival of feasting, gift-giving, formal visits between retainers and their lord, and the performance of traditional dances and music. The cherry blossom season in spring occasions, hanami, flower viewing parties held in the castle gardens, where the household gathers to drink sake, compose poetry, and admire the brief, overwhelming beauty of the blossoms. The aesthetic of mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness of the transience of all things, reaches its purest expression in these moments, when the most beautiful flowers are also the most fleeting. Autumn brings moon viewing. Summer brings Bonodori, the festival of the dead, when the spirits of ancestors are believed to return briefly to the world of the living, and lanterns are lit to guide them home. Each of these occasions involves specific foods, specific decorations, specific forms of entertainment, and specific obligations of hospitality and gift-giving that reinforce the social bonds within the castle community. But the beauty and the order conceal a darkness that is never far from the surface. The code of Bushido, the way of the warrior, demands that a samurai be willing to die at any moment for his lord, and this is not a metaphor. Seppuku, the ritual act of self-disembowelment, is both the ultimate expression of samurai honor and a punishment imposed by the lord or the shogunate for serious offenses. The procedure is formal, ritualized, and horrifying. The samurai kneels on a white mat, writes a death poem, opens his kimono, and draws a short blade across his abdomen from left to right. A designated second, the kaisha kunin, stands behind him and, at the moment the blade enters, strikes with a katana to sever the head, ending the agony. This is considered a mercy. Seppuku is not common. Most samurai live their entire lives without being ordered or compelled to perform it. But it is always present as a possibility, a shadow that falls across every moment of failure, disgrace, or disloyalty. A samurai who loses his lord's favor, who is found guilty of corruption, who fails in a duty, or who is captured in battle may be ordered to take his own life, and he is expected to do so without hesitation, because a samurai who fears death has already lost everything that makes him a samurai. Fire is the other great terror. Japanese castles, despite their stone foundations, are built primarily of wood. The floors, the walls above the stone base, the screens, the ceilings, the corridors, the roofs of all but the main keep. A single unattended oil lamp, a charcoal brazier knocked over in the night, a kitchen fire that escapes its hearth. Any of these can transform a castle compound into an inferno within minutes. Great castle fires are a regular feature of Japanese history, destroying in hours what took decades and fortunes to build. The castle at Edo, the shogun's own seat of power, burned and was rebuilt multiple times. Fire prevention is taken with deadly seriousness. Fire watches are posted throughout the night. Water buckets stand at every corridor junction, and fire doors of heavy, clay-plastered wood are built into the walls of critical buildings. But in a structure of wood and paper, inhabited by hundreds of people who cook over charcoal and light their rooms with oil lamps and candles, fire is not a question of if, but when. Disease, too, visits the castle with regularity. Smallpox, measles, influenza, and various fevers move through the close-quartered population with ease. Medical treatment is a mixture of Chinese herbal medicine, acupuncture, moxibustion, the burning of dried mugwort on or near the skin at specific points, and spiritual practices, including prayer and pilgrimage. Some treatments are effective, many are not. Infant mortality is high. A lord who loses all his sons to disease faces the extinction of his family line and the confiscation of his domain. A disaster not merely personal, but existential. The psychological pressure of this possibility, the knowledge that everything you have built, everything your ancestors fought for, can be erased by a childhood fever. hangs over every daimyo household like an invisible sword. Natural disasters compound the human-made difficulties. Japan sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, and earthquakes strike with a frequency and violence that no amount of architectural ingenuity can fully counter. The great stone walls of the castle, for all their sophisticated, curved engineering, can be toppled by a severe earthquake, and the wooden buildings above them collapse, catching fire from the overturned braziers and oil lamps within. Typhoons bring devastating winds and flooding. The summer heat brings insects, mosquitoes, flies, and the giant Japanese hornets whose sting can kill. And the dampness of the rainy season promotes mold that attacks the tatami, the screens, the stored rice, and the clothing. For the lord and his household, these natural calamities add a layer of anxiety to the already considerable pressures of political life, because a domain weakened by disaster is a domain that the shogunate may choose to confiscate and reassign to a more capable ruler. The rigidity of the class system creates its own form of suffering. A samurai born into a low-ranking family will remain low-ranking his entire life, regardless of his talent, his intelligence, or his dedication. A talented merchant can never become a samurai, no matter how wealthy he grows. The system produces order and stability, but it also produces frustration, resentment, and a suffocating sense of predetermination that no amount of personal effort can overcome. The ronin, masterless samurai who have lost their lord through death, disgrace, or the confiscation of a domain, occupy a particularly painful position. They retain their samurai status and their swords, but they have no income, no lord, no function, and no clear path back into the system. Many become teachers, bodyguards, or drifters. Some turn to crime. Their existence is a constant reminder that the system, for all its apparent stability, can eject a person from its structure at any moment and leave them with nothing but a sword and a name. When you visit a Japanese castle today, Himeji perhaps, the White Heron Castle, with its soaring white keep floating above the Harima Plain, or the reconstructed palace of Nagoya, with its gold leaf fusuma panels and meticulously restored tatami rooms, the beauty can feel timeless, otherworldly, a place where aesthetics and architecture achieved a perfection that transcends its historical moment. But the people who lived in these castles did not experience them as art objects. They experienced them as workplaces, as prisons of protocol, as arenas of political competition where a wrong word or an insufficient bow could end a career or a life. The beauty was real. The gardens, the painted screens, the moonlight on the moat, the cherry blossoms falling like snow on the paths. But it existed alongside and was inseparable from a system of control so total that it regulated the color of your socks. A samurai castle was not a home. It was not a fortress, though it was built like one. It was not a palace, though it contained rooms of extraordinary beauty. It was a machine for producing order, social order, political order, aesthetic order, in a society that had decided, after a century of devastating civil war, that order was worth any price. The price was freedom. The price was spontaneity. The price was the right to determine your own path through the world. And for 250 years, the people who lived within these walls paid that price, day after day, bow after bow, cup of tea after cup of tea, because they had seen what the alternative looked like. The burning villages, the famine, the endless slaughter of the Sengoku period. And they had decided, collectively and irrevocably, that this beautiful, suffocating, exquisitely regulated life was better. This was not a fairy tale of warrior honor. It was not a horror story of oppression. It was simply life. Japanese life, Edo period life, lived within walls that were both protection and confinement, in rooms that were both beautiful and surveilled, among people who were bound to each other by bonds of loyalty, duty, and fear so tightly woven that they formed a fabric no individual could tear without destroying themselves. The cherry blossoms still fall in the castle gardens every spring. They last as they always have, for a few days at most. And then they are gone, scattered by the wind, dissolved in the moat, remembered only as a brief, unbearable beauty that was never meant to last. The Japanese have a word for the ache this causes: mono no aware, the sadness of things. It is perhaps the truest thing the castle has to teach.